Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar. We'll give a few more minutes for people to join the meeting. So we'll do about 3 more minutes and then we'll start at 11:03. Thank you. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our AB 2143 PUC 769.2 informational webinar with the California Public Utilities Commission, CPUC, the Solar Utilities Reporting Guidance and Education Surge Initiative, and the California Department of Industrial Relations Labor Commissioner's Office. Here are just a few disclaimers for our presentation going forward. We have a disclaimer for CPUC Surge, and we also have a disclaimer from the California Labor Commissioner's Office. All right, and then here are again our workshop ground rules. If you joined our webinars before, you guys will be familiar with these. Our webinar is being recorded and will be available to everybody after the presentation is over. We will also send out the slides and post them on our website. Mics will be muted throughout the presentation. If you have a question, please use the Q&A for questions, as we want to make sure that we document the questions going forward for all of the questions asked throughout the presentation. And then also these will be addressed at the end of the presentation. And then finally, please be respectful of other participants and presenters, as we are all here to share information and learn together. Thank you. And then today, this is our agenda. We will start with an overview of AB 2143 PUC 769.2. Then we will go into the CPUC Surge section, which is how to stay compliant with a solar project subject to AB 2143. Then the Department of Industrial Relations, Labor Commissioner's Office will speak, and then we will also have Q&A at the end. All right, without further ado, I will turn it. Oh, actually, sorry. This is our list of presenters today. Amber Murakami Fester is our representative from the California Public Utilities Commission. She's not here today, but if you need to contact her, this is the contact person for AB 2143. From Surge, we have Sylvia Lin, who is our project manager, and Ariana Fernandez, who is our senior prevailing wage consultant and trainer. And then finally, from the DIR Labor Commissioner's Office, we have Sarah Brown, who is a deputy labor commissioner. Now I will pass the presentation to Sylvia.
Thank you, Brittany. And good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Surge webinar. And we'd like to get started with a brief overview in terms of what the regulation is about, when it started, what the exemptions are. So to give you a little bit of foundation for the other information that you'll be receiving here today. And next slide, please, Brittany. All right, so what we have here is the regulatory language itself, and we're not going to go into all of the words of the language. Like any regulation, it can be a little on the dry side, but here's what's important for you to know. So this is an excerpt. So it's a regulation that went into effect as of January 1st, 2024. And it imposes various public works requirements on public works projects. So what it does in essence is the solar construction projects that are subject to this under AB 2143 now fall within the realm of public works. And our DIR team today will go into a little bit more detail about that and the definition of public works and what that means here in this context. And what it means for you is that all workers employed on these projects need to be paid the general prevailing wage rate under the state of California DIR. Additionally, it's going to apply all public works requirements. And again, we're going to go into a little bit more detail on that shortly here, but that's going to include apprentice requirements, anything for those of you that are familiar with public works, meaning publicly funded projects, those requirements, those standards are now incorporated through this bill, through this regulation. Not only does that include the installation of solar panels, but also any associated battery storage. Again, I'll go into what the exemptions are here in a moment, but what this applies to are commercial projects. So if you're doing something on a business, on a multi-unit residential project, that is going to, that's what's going to trigger the application of AB 2143. And the next slide, please, Brittany. Okay, so the objective behind this regulation was to ensure that the construction workers and any apprentices on the project that are involved in what we call the qualified customer-sited renewable energy projects are going to be paid prevailing wages. Keep in mind, this is going to be it's applicable to projects that are governed under IOU territories, meaning Southern California Edison, PG&E, SDGE, and then are subject to the NEM tariff. So that's what we're talking about here. Again, the effective date was January 1st, 2024. And it applies to the renewable energy generation facilities and battery storage. So that is what's going to fall within this public works requirement umbrella. The PUC 2827.1 is the regulation that outlines the tariffs that include in the net energy metering, so the NEM tariffs. So for example, the reason that we talk about it being under the territory of one of these IOUs is that the people who are in that IOU territory are the ones that are going to be eligible, the customers that are going to be eligible for the NEM tariff. So that's critical. As a general rule, this is not going to apply to projects that are in what we call municipal utilities, because that usually what we don't bring into that are those NEM tariffs. There are some exceptions to that, and should you ever encounter a project along those lines, please reach out to Surge and we can let you know if AB 2143 is going to be applicable outside of the 3 IOUs. And again, just to, if you want a summary of what this regulation is about, it's just to ensure that the workers on these construction projects are paid the proper prevailing wages. And next slide, please. All right, so here is just a summary of the requirements. So again, pay construction workers and apprentices the prevailing wages. And then we always like to put the associated, what the governing regulation is. So if you wanted to see a little bit more detailed language about that, or why you have to do this, what says you need to do this, there's the regulation for your reference. In addition to paying the workers prevailing wage, you'll need to also maintain and verify certified payroll records. And those are going to be verified through the DIR. Again, we're going to go into a little bit more detail about how that information is submitted to Surge and to the DIR and what that data collection process looks like. In terms of how you'll be submitting those, you'll be submitting digital copies of certified payroll records, and this is under the AB 2143 requirement. It's biannually, meaning those payroll records for any eligible project will need to be submitted by July 1st and or December 31st of each year. So obviously that timing is going to depend on the duration of your project. So if you have a project that started in February and let's say ended in May, June of 2025, you will have to have submitted those payroll records by July 1st. If that project runs a little bit longer, then you're going to have another deadline, or if you have new projects that start up in the second half of the year, those all need to be submitted by December 31st. The DIR is going to go into a little bit more of a discussion in terms of what the schedule is for submission to the DIR, and I will let them cover that part of the presentation. But for AB 2143 purposes, and to meet what we call the Surge requirements, which is the program that I represent here, it's going to be biannually. Next slide, please. All right, as with most regulations, there are certain exemptions that are carved out here. So this means that when we talk about this as a general, what is required, who is required to follow this, these are the type of projects that don't apply, or where AB 2143 and Public Utilities Code 769.2 don't apply. So that's going to be residential facilities that have a maximum generating capacity of 15 kilowatts or less. So I'm going to stop there for right now and define that a little bit more. Residential facility can be a multi-unit apartment building, multi-unit. It can be an adult care facility, a child care facility. It is a residential unit, but it's not a single family home. So that's where the second part of this exemption comes in. Single family homes, regardless of the kilowatts that they generate, are not subject to this requirement. So that is a critical distinction to keep in mind as you contract for this type of work. Residential facility of a commercial nature, again, could be multifamily, 15 kilowatts or less, doesn't apply. Over that it does. And installed on a single family residence, what we consider our typical single family home, getting solar panels on their roof, the AB 2143 is not applicable. The next one is very critical to keep this in mind. Projects that already are classified as public works. Now, I said a moment ago that AB 2143 now makes these solar projects public works. What this exemption addresses is a project that is publicly funded, meaning it's already subject to prevailing wage pursuant to State of California Labor Code and the DIR. It means outside, notwithstanding AB 2143, if that's a public works project. And that's really important to keep in mind. I'll explain in a moment how you're going to identify those when you apply with the IOU. Another exemption is facilities that only serve modular homes, modular home communities, or multi-unit housing, say apartment buildings with 2 or fewer stories. So again, these areas are what AB 2143 does not apply to. When you apply, and we'll go into a little more detail on this later, but when you get your interconnection application filed with the with the utility company for a project such as this, you will be you're going to be presented with a checklist, a questionnaire that will ask, do you fall under one of these three exemptions? So make sure you answer that properly, because what could end up happening is you will either be put under the umbrella as having a project subject to AB 2143, or maybe not having one when you actually do. So it's critical that you understand what these exemptions apply to. And again, our team is here to answer any questions that you may have along these lines when you do in fact have a project. And I think we're ready to go to the next slide. And with that, I'll be turning it over to Ariana.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Sylvia. My name's Ariana, and I'll be taking you through the next few slides on how to stay compliant with your solar projects for AB 2143. Okay, so here are our contractor responsibilities. So the first step is to complete your interconnection application with your respective investor-owned utility, which would be Pacific Gas and Electric, Southern California Edison, or San Diego Gas and Electric. Next, because this bill deems these projects to be public works, contractors are required to follow existing public works requirements, all of the DIR regulations for awarding bodies and public works contractors. After that, contractors should register in Surge as a solar contractor. The prime contractor is responsible for registering the project in Surge, and then contractors are required to report their certified payrolls to both DIR and Surge. Okay, so starting with step one, the interconnection application. So as I mentioned, these would be with one of the three investor-owned utilities, PG&E, SCE, or SDG&E. If your company is going through like a smaller investor-owned utility, it's possible that AB 2143 may apply. So it would be best to check with that respective utility. As Sylvia mentioned, the utilities have added an AB 2143 prevailing wage disclosure form and a prevailing wage checklist now into their interconnection applications. So you will be asked those specific questions that Sylvia just went through to determine if your project is subject to AB 2143 or not. If you answer no to all of those questions, that means that none of the exemptions apply, and AB 2143 does apply to your project, in which case you will then be prompted to sign the prevailing wage disclosure form, notating you will be paying prevailing wages to all the workers for this project. If there's a third-party company or something completing this interconnection application, they would need to be aware and make sure that their contractors are complying with the requirements, registering in Surge, submitting their certified payroll reports, etc. So if you're the one doing the interconnection application, you will likely get the correspondence from our Surge team. So just be sure to forward that correspondence to your solar contractors. Next slide. Okay, so here's an example of what the prevailing wage disclosure form looks like. Essentially, it's going to give you, a little snippet of the regulation. And when you sign this, you are signing that you acknowledge these requirements and you will be paying prevailing wage. So just be mindful and aware of what this form is and what this form means. And next slide. Okay, so again, since this bill deems these types of projects to be public works, there are existing public works regulations in place that contractors and awarding bodies would need to comply with. So just a brief overview here, but the awarding body would also be known as the project owner. They are required to register the project with DIR and provide the DIR project ID number to the contractors. Public works contractors are also required to register with DIR, pay prevailing wages, follow the apprenticeship requirements as applicable, and maintain and submit their certified payroll reports. Okay, moving on to the surge requirements. So contractors with AB 2143 projects are required to register as a contractor with us in Surge. So we're using Submittable as the platform. So you'll first need to create your Submittable account. And then once you register and are approved, it will generate what's called the contractor identification number or the SIN number. So you'll need to save this because you'll need to use this as you're submitting your certified payroll records and submitting projects through Surge if you're a prime. This only needs to be done one time, and then once you get your SIN number, you're off and ready to go. And that should be it for contractor registration. So next slide. All right, so project registration in Surge. The prime contractor for the project is responsible for registering in Surge. So again, you'll input, you'll go to your submittable account, navigate to the project registration form, input all of the required information. And then once it's approved, once we can validate, that interconnection number against the IOU portal and verify this project is real and is subject to AB 2143, we will approve your project in Surge, and that will generate what's called the project identification number or the PIN number. So since the prime contractor will be doing this, they will need to share that PIN number with any subcontractors and any lower tiers that they may have, because they will all need that in order to submit their certified payrolls. So you'll input the PIN so that it ties everything together in our system. Next slide. Okay, so certified payroll reporting. So it is required to furnish the electronic certified payroll records, also known as the eCPRs, to the Labor Commissioner on a monthly basis. That is an existing requirement for public works projects. And then the new legislation under AB 2143 and Public Utilities Code 769.2 requires contractors to furnish their certified payroll records to the California Public Utilities Commission, by extension to Surge, biannually by July 1st and December 31st of each year. We do encourage contractors to submit more frequently into our portal. You don't have to wait for the deadlines. We encourage, monthly submissions if you are able to, just to make it congruent with your DIR submissions. And then we did want to add this little note that the eCPRs are separate and distinct from the certified payroll reports that are required under Labor Code Section 1776. The next slide. Okay, so again, we just wanted to give, the separate regulations. We tend to get a lot of questions about this, about why contractors have to submit to both Surge and DIR. There are two separate legislations. So the requirement for contractors to furnish their eCPRs to the DIR is found under Labor Code Section 1771.4, 3A, I, and II are the specific codes. And then again, that new legislation, which requires contractors to furnish their certified payroll records to the California Public Utilities Commission, is under Public Utilities Code 769.2. Next slide. So on our website, we do have some helpful resources for contractors. We have some YouTube videos posted about how to register as register as a contractor in Surge, register your project, and submit your certified payrolls. So these can be found under our education tab. I highly recommend contractors, just take a quick watch and make sure you understand everything. And then if you're still having questions or if you have issues, please feel free to reach out to us and we will help guide you through that. Okay, so just a brief touch on certified payroll records. So under Labor Code Section 1776, this is the requirement for contractors to maintain and submit their certified payroll records. And in order to be considered certified, it has to be accompanied by a signed statement of compliance. So essentially, you're making a declaration under penalty of perjury that you have paid the correct wages and complied with the applicable labor codes to the best of your knowledge. So without that form, it would not be considered a certified payroll report. So in Surge, we do need your A-1 131 payrolls. You can use a different form as long as it shows all of the required information under the labor code, such as name, address, social security number, their work classification, their hours worked, etc. It has to include that signed statement of compliance. And then in our Surge portal, you will just upload a PDF of your payroll reports. Next slide. We do want to see non-performing payrolls. These help to keep everything in order. So, for example, your first week on site would be your first performing payroll. And then let's say there was a period of a few weeks where you didn't perform any work. During that time, you would report to us what's called a statement of non-performance. So you still are certifying that no work was performed on the project during this time. And this helps to keep all of the payroll records in order. Because if we don't get these non-performing payrolls, it just looks like they're missing. We don't know if work was performed or not. So that's the purpose of the non-performing payrolls. So there is a statement of non-performance form that you can use, or you can just use the blank A1 131 form and write no work performed on it. Next slide. All right, so just to summarize all of that, when you perform work on one of these types of projects that are subject to AB 2143, you are required to pay those workers prevailing wages if they were on site performing covered labor. You are required to maintain and submit your certified payroll records to both Surge and DIR. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sarah to take you through the DIR's portion.
Thank you so much, Ariana. Hi, good morning. My name is Sarah Brown. I am a Deputy Labor Commissioner in the Los Angeles Public Works Unit of the Labor Commissioner's Office, and I'm here to talk about compliance from the perspective of the Labor Commissioner's Office. We can get started with the first slide. We've been talking a lot about public works today, and the Labor Code defines public works in Section 1720 as work that is paid for out of public funds, done under contract, and the work is described as construction, alteration, demolition, installation, repair, or maintenance. We're going to look a little bit more into detail at the construction portion on the next slide. And we see here that the definition of construction also includes pre-construction activities such as design, site assessment, feasibility studies, inspections, and land surveying. And it also includes post-construction activities such as site cleanup. Next slide. So as we mentioned a little earlier in the presentation, the awarding body is the entity that awards a contract for public works, also known as the project owner. And for public works projects, for the Labor Commissioner's Office, we have the awarding body register the project. So for the Labor Commissioner's Office, it's going to be the project owner, the entity awarding the contract, who is going to have to register that project with us. Next slide. So the project registration requirements for the Labor Code. The Labor Code states that awarding bodies must provide electronic notice to DIR of all public works contracts within 30 days of the award, but in no event later than the first day in which a contractor has workers employed upon the public work. So to look at this section of the Labor Code in a little more detail, what we mean by provide electronic notice is to register your project using our online service portal for project registration, which we'll look at in just a minute. And the timeline for project registration is within 30 days of awarding the public works project. However, if work on the project is going to get started sooner than that 30-day window would elapse, in that event, you need to have your project registered by the first day that work is happening on the public works project. We see here the blue text has the language of the small project exemption. And what that means is that project registration requirements actually do not apply to projects that are $25,000 or less for construction, alteration, demolition, installation, or repair, or $15,000 or less for maintenance work. Now, it's important to note here that when we talk about these monetary thresholds for the small project exemption, we are talking about the total project value, not any individual contract or subcontract. If the project is $25,000 or less, or $15,000 or less for maintenance, that's when the small project exemption applies. Next slide. So as I mentioned, project registration takes place online through our service portal. We don't have time today to do a full step-by-step, but luckily we have our support center online, which does feature step-by-step user guides and videos for all the steps you'll need to take, including creating a user account, linking your individual user account to your awarding body, and then registering your public works projects. Next slide, please. Once a public works project has been registered, it will show up in our project registration database, and the public can access that and use it to search for public works projects. So we see here, this is the homepage of the new DIR Services portal. In the upper right-hand side of the screen, we see projects. If you click that, that will take you to the search engine for all registered public works projects. Next slide, please. In addition to the awarding body's responsibility to register the project, contractors themselves must be registered with DIR to work on public works projects. And the definition of a public works contractor is anyone who bids on or enters into a contract to perform work that requires the payment of prevailing wages. This includes subcontractors who have entered into a contract with another contractor to perform a portion of the work on a public works project. It also includes sole proprietors and brokers who are responsible for performing work on a public works project, even if they do not have employees or will not use their own employees to perform the work. Anyone who fits this definition of a contractor is required to register with DIR. Next slide, please. Some facts to know about contractor registration. It costs $400 per fiscal year. The fiscal year runs July 1st through June 30th, so we are currently approaching the end of the 2024-2025 fiscal year. You can register for up to 3 fiscal years at a time if you know you'll be working on public works projects for the foreseeable future. Registrations are valid per legal entity. So if your organization transitions to a different legal entity type, you'll need to create a new registration and receive a new contractor registration number for your new legal entity. Additionally, please be aware that contractors are liable for penalties for working on public works projects without an active registration. Next slide, please. Contractor registration also takes place through our online service portal, and just like project registration, our support center has step-by-step guides and videos for creating your user account and registering as a contractor. If you were previously registered on our old system, you also have the ability to import your existing legacy registration from our old system into our new system. Next slide, please. So as we have stated, contractors that are working on projects subject to AB 2143 and the Public Utilities Code 769.2 requirements must pay construction workers and apprentices prevailing wages. The prevailing wage is the minimum wage rate that must be paid to workers on public works projects. Those wage rates are determined by the Director of the Department of Industrial Relations. They are based on the type of work being performed, also referred to as the craft or classification, as well as the location of the project. They are usually based on collective bargaining agreements. Something important to note is because AB 2143 designates these projects as public works projects, apprenticeship requirements do apply. Next slide, please. When we are looking at the prevailing wages for any given project, here's the information that we need to determine what is the correct prevailing wage determination to use. We start with the contract date, the date that the awarding body and the contractor signs the contract for the project. Now, traditionally in public works investigations, what we actually use is the bid advertisement date, the date that the awarding body first published a notice inviting bids. However, with AB 2143 projects, we have found that it's much more common for those projects not to be advertised for bids, so we're going to be using the contract date. And we use that to determine the determination effective date. Public works prevailing wage determinations are published twice a year. And then we use the contract date to determine which prevailing wage determination the project is subject to, either the first or the second. Next, we look at the location of the project, the region or the county. And then finally, we look at the classification or craft being used to determine which prevailing wage determination to use. Next slide, please. So of course, it's important to know what classification to use for the prevailing wage work on your project, so you know what is the correct wage rate to pay your workers. As we mentioned previously, the prevailing wage rates are set by the Office of the Director, and specifically the research units, the prevailing wage unit within the Office of the Director are the unit that creates the prevailing wage determinations, including the scope of work. So they are your best resource for questions on what scope of work is covered by which classification. This is a screenshot here of some information available on our website. It's the contact information for the prevailing wage unit, as well as the information that they request so that they can best respond to your inquiry. Next slide, please. So certified payroll records, as we've been discussing previously, contractors on public works projects are obligated to maintain and furnish certified payroll records. And this includes both electronic certified payroll records, shortens to ECPR, as well as traditional certified payroll records found on the form A1131. The requirement to maintain and submit ECPRs on a monthly basis is a separate requirement from the requirement to maintain certified payroll records. Next slide. So a really common question that we get is, why are we required to both maintain and submit ECPRs as well as the form A1131? And the answer is that from an enforcement perspective, these forms have different requirements and responsibilities and are used for different functions. So those ECPRs that we ask you to upload on a monthly basis have less required information than the full form A1131. It's meant to be a much more succinct capture of the work being done on your public works prevailing wage process, like we see here with the more simple rendering of the apple on the left-hand side. In contrast, the form A1131 has much more comprehensive payroll information. These are the records that we would request from you if we were to do an investigation of your public works project. That's why we see the more detailed image of the apple on the right-hand side. That represents those much more fleshed out records on the form A1131. And separately, that's why we recommend that you are continuously maintaining those records on the form A1131. If we are to open an investigation onto your public works project, we are going to send you a request for those payroll records on that form that you will have 10 business days to reply to. Otherwise, you'll be at risk of a penalty for late submission of records. It's really beneficial to have those records, ready to be furnished at any time. Otherwise, you'll really be scrambling to get them together in time for that 10-day deadline. All right, next slide, please. So here's that form A1131. Something I do want to mention is that what is most important about this form is the information that it contains, not its specific format. If you have a payroll format that contains all of the same required information as the form A1131, you're welcome to keep using your form. Again, as long as it all captures the same required information, it doesn't need to be this specific form, although this form is available for download on our website. Next slide. As we've discussed, what makes these payroll records certified is this accompanying statement under penalty of perjury as to their accuracy. So it's important to fill out a corresponding certification form for every week of your certified payroll records. Next slide. In comparison, this is the start to our electronic certified payroll record form. As we can see here, it's a much more simplified version of the information captured on the form A1131. Just like project registration, just like contractor registration, we do have guides and videos for ECPR uploading available on our support center. Next slide, please. Something to note, if you visit our website, you're going to see this big beige block of text on virtually every web page. So there is currently an enforcement pause for electronic certified payroll upload and contractor registration. That's going to be in effect until June 22nd, 2025. The context for this is when we rolled out our new service portal last year in June 2024, We did experience some issues with the contractor registration system and electronic certified payroll records. So to that end, we are not enforcing penalties for any contractor or awarding body that is not able to meet these compliance requirements specifically due to technical errors with the new system. So just be advised that if you are experiencing technical errors with project registration, contractor registration, or eCPR renewal, there is currently, or pardon, with eCPR submission, there is currently an enforcement pause on those items. Next slide, please. So as we've mentioned, this is the support center. Here's the URL. It includes things such as how-to guides. There's just a selection of them there on the left-hand side. There's many more guides on the website itself. We also have on the support center upcoming trainings and events. We have both in-person and online events if you want more in-depth knowledge and training on public works compliance and general public works knowledge. Next slide. Oh, and with that, I believe I will be sending it back to you, Brittany. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Sarah. I just also wanted just to thank all of the speakers today, Sylvia, Ariana, Sarah, for being here and sharing the information on AB 2143. This is the resources page that we have for everybody. We encourage you to visit our Surge website at cpucsurge.org. It has a wealth of information. All of the information here presented today is on our website. If you would like to sign up for our mailing list, these are for emails only. You can do so as well on our website. We have a sign-up sheet there, and we do send emails once a week to folks who are subscribed. And then also we have our LinkedIn account where we post on, upcoming deadlines and also upcoming events for Surge. And then we do have the YouTube video resources for contractors, as Ariana mentioned in her speaking points, that we do have videos available that will help contractors, with a step-by-step walkthrough through the Surge compliance portal, with whether that's the contract registration, the project registration for primes, or the payroll upload submissions. And then again, if you have any questions or need help with anything regarding AB 2143 applicability or compliance information, please contact us via email at info@cpucsurge.org, or even you can call us on our hotline 1-800-549-2143. And then now we can move on to our Q&A session, and I'll hand it over to Christina.
Great, thanks, Brittany. Just a reminder, if you do have any questions, you can drop those into the Q&A feature. If we run out of time and we don't get to your question today, don't worry, we will be releasing a Q&A document after the webinar, so your questions will be addressed then. And then if you have any, project-specific or contractor-specific questions, we may just reach out via email to answer those. So without further ado, I'll just start getting into some of the questions that we've received. So the first question, we wanted to confirm that projects completed before 2024 do not have to be registered into the Surge portal.
I'd be glad to take that one, Christina. Thank you. General rule, that is correct. If the project was, let's say the contract was entered into, the project started, you received your IOU interconnection application number, you filed that application all prior to January 1st, 2024. The project will most likely be exempted from AB 2143. However, there are just various parts of that need to be verified, because sometimes those activities will straddle between 2023, for example, and 2024. So the best bet is to reach out to the Surge team, provide us with the circumstances, the applicable dates, and then we'll help make that determination as to whether it's exempt. But yes, for the most part, if you entered into the contract and if it's clear cut, you started the project, ended the project, received the final inspection report all prior to the enactment date, it would most likely be exempt from AB 2143. That is correct.
Thank you, Sylvia. Another question, does AB 2143 apply to residential single-family homes where no business is being conducted if the system is over 15 kilowatts?
Yeah, since I covered that slide, I'll go ahead and take that one as well. That is correct. So if you have a single family home, not a commercial enterprise, it's not multifamily unit, it's just a regular home that a family lives in, they receive, they contract for solar panels and maybe an associated battery. It does not matter how many kilowatts that generates. Single family residence is exempt from AB 2143.
Thank you. And kind of going in theme here, is there a clear and concise definition of a single-family home?
I don't believe the regulation goes into an exact definition, but it is oftentimes you'll find that it is zoned, a residence. If you look at the zoning information, it's zoned as a single family home. If you go on to one of the maybe real estate websites, it will say single family residence. Typically, it is the definition or the description of what that facility is. It will say whether you'll establish, is it a business, is it a commercial enterprise, or is the structure being used as a full-time residential home for a family. So I think that's probably, I know that's rather general, but that's pretty much the definition. So that, again, there are ways to establish whether that really falls within the guidelines of a single family residence versus, again, a commercial enterprise.
Awesome, thank you. Next question, do commercial installations that are installed as non-export still have the prevailing wage requirement?
I'll go ahead and field that as well. Non-export, I'm assuming you mean not subject to, not eligible for the NEM tariff. So if that is the case, if that's what you're referring to here, it's if you're not taking, if the owner of the property is not taking the NEM tariff or it's not eligible for that, no, this only applies to the NEM tariff. On these export, these type of questions, you're probably best off to, when you submit your interconnection application to the utility, you may want to pose that question to them. If it's a question outside the realm of IOU, please present it to us. If we cannot answer it, we will forward that to the CPUC.
Thank you. Next question. There doesn't seem to be a solar/energy storage wage classification on the DIR website. What is the appropriate classification and prevailing wage rate for solar installations? Is that the same class/rate for energy storage installations?
I'm happy to answer this. So any question on, what classification to use is, fact specific, county specific, project specific. So I couldn't answer it as generally. I can't give you a general answer in this webinar, but that would be where you would reach out to the prevailing wage research unit within the office of the director. Their contact information was in one of my slides. Send them the project information, the scope of work, the county, the contract date, and they'll be able to provide you with the correct classification to use for your project. This one. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next question. We will be installing PV on multifamily housing units larger than 15 kilowatts. There are 3 stories, but the first story comprises of just garages. Are we exempt from AB 2143?
I can go ahead and try to answer that question if I understand it correctly. So you're saying it is classified as a multifamily unit, for example, but when we're talking about whether it has that exemption of, is it on 2 stories or less, you, in the past where that question has been presented to us, we have requested that the contractor seek guidance from the DIR in terms of whether that type of structure, what the characterization of it is. The code doesn't really speak to that, but in most cases, it's still going to be considered a 3-story. We'll need to, the best thing you can do, if you have a project like this, go ahead and reach out. Why don't you start with the surge team? And if you can provide us some specific information in terms of the layout of the property, specifically what that's being used for. So again, we're going to need a lot more specific information about that structure itself, about the project itself. So it's probably easier to answer than it is as a general summary here, today's webinar. So again, please reach out to the surge team, start there, and we will help you with that process. If we need to reach out to one of our other partners in this process, whether it be the DIR or the CPUC, we'll certainly bring them into the discussion, but we can help you determine that, as can the DIR possibly.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in from the DIR's perspective is that anytime your question takes the shape of, is my project a public works project? Is my work covered work? What you need is what we call a coverage determination, which is also issued by the director's office. Unfortunately, I don't have the contact information for my slides for how to request a coverage determination. They have an email address, but I can make sure to get that over to Surge so it can be distributed after the webinar.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, next question. How can I guide a project owner who represents the landowner and has hired us but doesn't hold a contractor or CSLB license number to register the project with the DIR?
Would you mind repeating that question for me one more time?
Yeah, of course. How can I guide a project owner who represents the landowner and has hired us but doesn't hold a contractor or CSLB license number to register the project with the DIR?
Oh, a CSLB license is not required to register the project. Since the project registration is done by the awarding body, there is no assumption that they have a contractor's license or registration. So they don't need one to register the project.
Thank you. Another question, do I have to report to the DIR monthly, even if it's under AB 2143?
Yes, so all public works requirements have the obligation to provide certified payroll records on a monthly basis. Our requirements are separate from Surge, who have the biannual requirement. Ours are still monthly.
Thank you. Next question. If the awarding body or owner does not want to register the project with the DIR, is there any other way to register the project?
No, the labor code establishes that it is the awarding body's responsibility to register the project, so they are ultimately responsible to do so.
Thank you. And then kind of in hand with that question, why can't a contractor register a project?
Because the awarding agency is the one that is considered responsible for the project, since they are the ones that awarded the project to the contractor. From the DIR's perspective, that makes the awarding body the project owner. So the registration of that project is their responsibility, separate from the contractor, whose responsibility is to register themselves as a contractor.
Awesome, thank you. Where does the project owner go to register their project and what form do they use?
Is this for, I assume, DIR project registration?
It sounds like that, yeah.
Great. So they could start at our website, dir.ca.gov. That's the homepage for the overall Department of Industrial Relations. From there, they're going to click on the blue link that says Public Works. That's going to take them to the Public Works homepage. From our Public Works homepage, we have a big blue button that says DIR Service Portal. That's going to take them where they need to be.
And since the question did not specify whether that was surge or DIR, I'll go ahead and just chime in quickly on the surge side. For the contractor registering a project, that would be on the surge side, that would be through our website. So you can just say register the project. And as Ariana pointed out during the presentation, the project registration on the DIR side is performed as Sarah just described on the DIR by the project, by the awarding body. And then on the surge side, the project is registered by the prime contractor. So just to distinguish those two and verify that.
Thank you, Sylvia. Another question, is there a bid? If there is a bid date, does this apply to AB 2143, or is this triggered for when the interconnection application is filed?
The term bid advertisement typically applies to if you have a public works project that is subject to maybe a request for proposal or something where you have public funds involved. And that goes to that question, is this already a public works project, meaning it's publicly funded? So if that is where a bid advertisement comes in. But I think as Sarah discussed as part of her presentation, you're for these projects that are privately funded, you're not going to have a public solicitation or a bid advertisement date. So what you're going to use as that in lieu of a bid advertisement date is the contract execution date. So the date that the contract was signed by the project owner and the prime contractor. So in the context of these projects, that takes the place of the bid advertisement date. So I hope that answers your question.
Another question, the DIR is not currently taking the eCPRs. I assume that the A-1-131, they're also not taking that as well.
So the Form A-1-131, those like hard copy certified appeal records, are not uploaded online. So they are not affected by any issues with the service portal. You still have the obligation to maintain those Form A-1-131 records since they don't interact with the online portal in any means. Additionally,
Okay.
even though individual users are experiencing some issues, the eCPR portal is still functional. If you're having a hard time uploading your specific records, please reach out to us at publicworks@dir.ca.gov so we can troubleshoot your individual workers. But contractors have been able to upload eCPR successfully.
Thank you. Next question. If a commercial solar installation project is not a public works project, does the business owner still need to register the project with the DIR?
I apologize. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, of course. If a commercial solar installation project is not a public works project, does the business owner still need to register the project with the DIR?
No, the only projects that are required to be registered with DIR are public works projects.
And I'll just quickly add on, just to kind of repeat what we covered during the presentation. If it's within AB 2143, solar commercial construction, it's going to be public works. And then certainly if it's publicly funded, it will likely be public works. So if you're talking about it's not either of those, it doesn't fall under AB 2143 and it's not a public works project pursuant to the DIR requirements, then as Sarah stated, no, then you would not load to the DIR if it's not public works.
Thank you, Sylvia and Sarah. Another question, there are many owners that have no idea how to register a project. Is it acceptable for the prime contractor to help with this?
Again, from the perspective of the labor code, it's the awarding body's responsibility to register the project. So that's what we're looking for. But I mean, we're not going to say that the prime contractor can't send them links to our support center and can't walk them through it if they're less familiar.
Great, thank you. Another question, it seems like there is double reporting to the DIR monthly, but surge requires just twice a year. If we are compliant for surge but not reporting monthly for the DIR, will we be fined or will penalties be applied?
So DIR and surge have separate responsibilities, separate requirements, separate penalty enforcements. Again, disregarding the fact that there is currently an enforcement pause on eCPR uploads due to any issues contractors might have with the new system. If you were to not upload your certified payroll records in a timely manner to DIR, yes, you would still be liable for penalties under the Labor Code because that's a separate requirement from your obligations to surge. Being compliant with surge would not necessarily mean you were in compliance with the DIR since we have that monthly requirement as opposed to the biannual requirement.
Awesome, thank you, Sarah. Another question, are we required to submit payroll reports regularly if we are only installing one project in the prevailing wage requirement?
All projects that are subject to prevailing wage that don't meet that small project exemption have the requirement to upload certified payroll records. So yes, if you have a public works project subject to prevailing wage, it carries that responsibility to upload eCPRs on a monthly basis.
Great, thank you. Next question, if an AB 2143 project is part of an otherwise private project, for example, a private apartment building, do AB 2143's requirements only apply to the AB 2143 project, the energy improvement, rather than the entire project?
I'll go ahead and take that question. So if you're referring to, you have an overall construction project and part of it is not subject to AB 2143, the only part where you'd have to, that is subject to AB 2143 is that involves the installation of the solar panels or the associated battery storage. So wherever the solar commercial construction component is being performed. So again, this is another scenario where we would need a little bit more information to help you determine if there is applicability here. In terms of commercial, it's not commercial, or if it is a commercial, and it can be commercial residential. So, as we were talking about in our presentation, if you have, for example, an apartment building or a residential that, again, is not a single family residence and it's generating more than the 15 kilowatts, then it's going to be under AB 2143. But if you have a property where you're doing an overall construction project and it's divided between that solar component and just general construction, we would need a little bit more information as to the scope of work in terms of the various segments, and also what part of it maybe you registered as part of the interconnection application. So that involves a little bit more of an analysis and evaluation to determine the specific facts.
Thank you, Sylvia. And then this question, they just want to confirm the awarding body does not need a contractor license number to register the project via the DIR.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Next question, are commercial projects under the 15 kilowatts required to pay prevailing wage and are subject to the reporting requirements? Oh, Sylvia, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Only if the 15 kilowatt threshold only applies in that residential exemption. I'm going to use, let's say you're installing it on a fast food establishment. Now, it's highly unlikely probably that it would be under the 15 kilowatts, but If it is, for example, if you have a commercial, let's say a retail establishment, and it's under 15 kilowatts, it would still be subject to AB 2143 because it does not fall within that residential category.
Thank you. What is the process of registering an awarding body?
Sure, I'm assuming this pertains to DIR registration. So again, that happens through our service portal, where you're going to register your individual account so that you can access the system and then register public works projects on behalf of the awarding agency that you work for. There's step-by-step guides to that on the support center. All the support guides that I think is helpful are tagged with if they're for the intended audience, whether that's contractors or an awarding body. So I would just recommend that this question asker review all of the guides that are tagged for awarding bodies. That's going to give them a really comprehensive guide on how to register that project.
Thanks, Sarah. Next question. So the A-1-131 is not sent to the DIR, only kept at the contractor's office with the rest of the paperwork.
Oh, my camera's not showing up. I'm not sure if you can hear me, but the answer is yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. We could hear you, so thanks.
I just want to add real quick to that question. In our Surge portal, that's where you will upload your A-1-131 payroll reports. We actually don't need any eCPRs uploaded into our portal. So you, as a contractor, would be required to maintain those and then submit those into Surge. I know that can be a little confusing.
Thank you, Ariana. Next question. How long does it usually take for the DIR statistics to respond to a request for wage rates?
Because that's a separate division within the Department of Industrial Relations, I couldn't really give a good estimate on what their turnaround time is. I just don't want to speak on behalf of another agency. What I will advise, though, is there's a phone number listed on that. I would say if it's more time sensitive, certainly try to give them a call, see if you can speak to somebody as opposed to sending an email if it's particularly time sensitive.
Great, thank you. Next question. If a project is privately funded but falls under net metering laws, would it fall under AB 2143? For example, a private commercial business that has received financing through their lender and has submitted an interconnection application in 2024 for NEM 2.
Yeah, that's a question that we commonly receive. AB 2143 projects are all privately funded. If it is a publicly funded project, it's going to fall out under that exemption. Is this already a public works project? But as a general rule, the projects that fall within this AB 2143 regulation all involve private funds, as between, again, the property owner and the prime contractor.
Awesome, thank you. Let's see. If a project is already considered public works, the surge requirements don't apply, but we still need to report to the DIR and pay prevailing wages.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, awesome. Let me go through some of the questions that are in review. Let's see. If a site host or landowner is not going to actually own a PV system being built to benefit them, like a third-party owned system contracted under a power purchase or lease agreement, is that entity still considered the awarding body or project owner?
I think it's that would require a little bit more evaluation in terms of that's a little more complicated of a question. But as a general rule, the awarding body is going to be the entity or the individual that entered into the contract with the prime contractor. Ariana, did you want to add something to that definition?
Yeah, I was going to say we have received a couple questions like this where the, kind of awarding body or project owner is kind of convoluted and there's like multiple different entities. So these types of questions would require a more in-depth analysis and would likely need to go to DIR to help determine. So if you want to send us, a little more details in that question, then we can get a little more analysis going and help answer that for you.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Another question. Let's say there's a commercial building project that includes solar. The prime contractor for the whole building will sub out the solar install portion. Would the prime be responsible for the surge registration?
I can go ahead and take that one. So again, I'm just going to read it for everyone. So she said, let's say there's a commercial building project that includes solar. The prime contractor for the whole building will sub out the solar install portion. Would the prime contractor be registered for surge project registration? So essentially that would depend on the contract. Is that prime contractor directly contracted with the project owner or the awarding body for the solar portion? If so, even if they are not performing the work and subcontracting it out, they would still be considered the prime contractor as they do have that contract directly with the awarding body. They would just be a not self-performing prime. So they would be required to register the project in Surge. And then on our form, we have an area where they can list out all of their subcontractors that will be performing that solar installation.
Awesome, thank you. Another question was asking whether projects under $25,000 are exempt from these requirements.
I can address that. So specifically for public works projects, small projects, so $25,000 or less for construction, alteration, demolition, installation, or repair work are exempt from a few of our requirements. They're exempt from project registration. They are exempt from contractor registration. They are exempt from electronic certified payroll reporting. Important to note, however, that they are not exempt from the requirement to pay prevailing wages. That applies to all projects that are $1,000 or greater for public works projects. Additionally, they are not exempt from the requirement to maintain those Form A1131 payroll records and provide them upon request. So an exemption for some requirements, not all of them, from DIR's perspective.
And I'm just going to build on exactly what Sarah's saying here is because it is still subject to payment of prevailing wage and submission of these certified payroll reports, the AB 2143 does not exempt based on a dollar value threshold. So you'd still have to submit that prevailing wage form to the DIR, to Surge and to pay prevailing wage pursuant to the regulation, pursuant to AB 2143.
Awesome. Thank you. This question, if we installed a solar system on a commercial property prior to AB 2143 or prior to that January 1st, 2024, and now the customer is asking for us to add 16 kilowatts battery to the system, would this battery installation fall under AB 2143?
Pursuant to the regulation, it is likely, but again, we would want a little bit more information on this because there's a lot of variables here, but the regulation does specifically state that if there are any, it's considered an upgrade under the regulation. So you have the initial solar panel installation, for example, and like what you're describing, now you have the battery component. It would likely be subject to AB 2143 under the characterization of upgrade. But again, we encourage you to contact the Surge support team and provide us with specifics of that project, and that would warrant further evaluation for a definitive answer.
Great, thanks, Sylvia. Another question, it's asking about the non-export projects again and whether those need to comply with AB 2143. So maybe we just want to go over that one more time.
We would need a little bit more information on the non-export component. We've had a few questions in this area, but I would really need to defer on that question to you providing some additional information with regard to what that means in the context of this project. Just again, speaking to the language of the regulation, which specifically defines it as, any projects that benefits from the NEM tariff. If they're not taking the tariff, and I know this is probably going to be different than what you're talking about here as the export component, the NEM portion, if they're not taking that tariff, it would not be subject likely to AB 2143. With regard to the export, again, please contact the Surge team with more specific information about the project, and then we will provide guidance to the best that we can. And if we have to defer to the IOU or CPUC, we will bring them into the discussion.
Great, thank you, Sylvia. Question to clarify, the 15 kilowatt limit only applies to residential use projects, correct? If it is a privately funded commercial project under 15 kilowatts, would it fall under AB 2143?
Yeah, and that 15 kilowatt threshold, that anything below that, again, it applies to residential. So if you have a commercial, let's say retail establishment, and it generates under this project less than 15 kilowatts, it's still going to be subject. That exemption specifically is in the context of residential. That is not a single family home.
Great, thank you, Sylvia. We do have some pretty project-specific or contractor-specific questions that we are holding, and we will reach out to you via email to address those. I do want to allow a little bit more time for contractors to get in any last-minute questions that maybe weren't covered. So I'll give it a minute or two, but I'm not seeing any new ones come through at the moment. So again, we'll just give it maybe till 12:18, and if we don't see anything new come through, then we'll kind of close out. Let's see. There is a question that popped up. Does AB 2143 compliance extend to O&M after the project has been handed over to the owner? If so, how long does compliance apply?
AB 2143 the objective is to apply to the construction phase, ongoing support, and so operations and maintenance. We would probably need more information here to determine what specifically is involved, the tasks involved in operation and maintenance, but most it's possible that it won't. That portion of it is the construction portion of it that is going to be subject to. However, if you have some operations and maintenance work that should be covered by prevailing wage, that's going to require a separate analysis, again, for us to give you a definite answer on whether that would be covered.
Great, thank you, Sylvia.
Christina, if we have a little time, this is in response to a specific question, but some information I think might be helpful to pass along if we have any project owners or awarding bodies listening. For project owners creating accounts in our system, our project registration system is set up to recognize the traditional email addresses that we see for awarding bodies like .gov, .edu. However, we know that a lot of project owners for AB 2143 might be using, for example, like a personal email address or like a more business affiliated email address. So because the Labor Commissioner's Office needs to manually approve those no awarding body accounts, I just wanted to pass on some tips that will help us approve those accounts faster. So some things you can do to help us identify your AB 2143 affiliated account registration. If you include AB 2143 in your awarding body name or project owner name, such as the example he gave is Jim Solar Project AB 2143. If you create a new bespoke email address for your awarding body account, jimsolarab2143@gmail.com, or shoot us an email at, again, publicworks@dir.ca.gov with the subject line AB 2143 email verification. That'll just help us pick your accounts out so we can make sure to get them approved, since, again, those non-standard email addresses for accounts need to be approved manually. If you can help us identify it as an AB 2143 affiliated account, it'll let us approve them faster.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah.
That was a really good point, Sarah. I did want to add something to that. Whenever you are reaching out to DIR, it is recommended to include, AB 2143 in the subject line of your email and in the body, ideally. For example, if you just reach out and tell them your project doesn't have any public funding and you don't give them the context of AB 2143, they might not give you the proper guidance. So always a good rule of thumb to, let them know this is an AB 2143 solar project, and that way they know that they have that context and then can give you the proper, guidance and things that you would need.
Awesome. Thank you, Ariana. I'm not seeing any new questions pop in to the Q&A feature. So we are going to close out the presentation. Again, these slides will be provided to all the attendees after the presentation ends. And once we have finalized the Q&A document, that will also be provided. And if you had some questions maybe that were answered today, those will be addressed in the Q&A document, or we will send a separate email. We also have great resources on our website, like Brittany mentioned. Our education tab is great. That includes a lot of different resources, including videos to the different registrations, contractor, project registration on the Surge portal, as well as how to upload your certified payroll. And we also have previous Q&A documents from our previous presentations that are on there as well. And then our FAQ page, we are constantly adding to that. So feel free to look through there. I think a lot of the questions that came up today, those are on our FAQ page as well. And then again, if you have any questions, feel free to email us at info@cpucsurge.org or give us a call at 1-800-549-2143. Again, thank you so much. Thank you to our presenters, Sarah, Sylvia, and Ariana, and we hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have a good one.
Thank you,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.